Good evening and welcome to this inaugural session of G20 University Connect lecture series. If you think an idea can change lives, you are rightly seated. This is the prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru University where we cultivate curiosity to harvest ingenuity. To this inaugural session, I welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Shanti Sri Dhulipudi Pandit, under whose aspiring leadership the university is moving strength to strength. Please join me with a round of a big applause to honor our Madam Vice Chancellor. Okay, please join. We are incredibly delighted to welcome our chief guest, Ambassador Harshvardhan Shringla, Chief Coordinator of India's G20 presidency. He has been a seasoned diplomat with an illustrious career of more than 4 decades in Indian Foreign Services. He's been Indian ambassador to the United States, Bangladesh, and Thailand. He served 2 terms in United Nations and was India's permanent representative to the UNESCO. Let's welcome him with a thunderous round of applause. I also heartily welcome Professor S.D. Muni, Professor Emeritus at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He personifies a rare combination of an eminent scholarship and distinguished diplomatic achievements for more than 4 decades. He's contributed a vast volume of literature on India's foreign policy and has been associated with several universities, National University of Singapore, Banaras Hindu University and University of Rajasthan. His notable roles include India's Special Envoy for UN Reforms, an ambassador to the Laos People's Democratic Republic. Professor Muni has been bestowed with Sri Lanka Ratna, the country's highest national honor for foreign nationals. Let's facilitate him with a big round of applause. Thank you. We are equally heartened to welcome Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General of Research and Information Systems for Developing Countries, a New Delhi-based think tank. Professor Chaturvedi also holds several distinguished positions as Vice Chairman of Atal Bihari Vajpayee Institute of Good Governance and Policy Analysis, ex officio Vice Chairman of Madhya Pradesh State Policy and Planning Commission, Member Board of Governors RBI. He is a prolific author with more than 22 books to his credit, and his book on South-South cooperation is internationally acclaimed. Let's join to warmly welcome Professor Chaturvedi. We will also acknowledge Professor B.S. Balaji, Chairperson, Special Center for E-Learning, for helping us to put all this together. Thank you. Ma'am, may I request you to take over the proceedings?
Respected Sri Harshvardhan Shringla, the G20 Chief Coordinator, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General RIS, and Professor S.D. Muni, who is also my teacher. So welcome back to JNU, our Professor Emeritus, and Professor Balaji, as well as Dr. Samina Ahmed, our Dean, Professor Shrikant Kondapalli, other faculty, students, and everybody. I apologize for, we should have taken the convention center because maybe some of the organizers were not so sure that we might have so many crowd. I promised them that JNU will never be empty for a very good program. So I welcome you all for especially the G20, which the lecture series that we are going to have are going to be on pathways and paradigms for India's G20 presidency. So let me inform you that JNU creates the best narratives. So I think this is the place where you can have ideas, where we have brilliant faculty as well as students and multiple narratives that have been going on. I thank the ministry as well as RIS for giving us this opportunity to organize, also Professor Gulshan Sachdeva, who has greatly helped in this endeavor. G20 accounts for 2/3 of the global population, 75% of global trade, 85% of the world's GDP. And presidency especially coming to a country that I call a civilization state, is very important because we are not only the world's largest democracy, but with ancient roots. The reason I say this is, I hope most of you students know that both the Anubhava Mandapa of uh, in Karnataka, as well as the Uttara Merur inscription, are nearly 1,800 years before Magna Carta. Magna Carta, on the basis of which you call England as the mother of all democracies. Please read both these documents of Basava and the Chola inscription. They are much more detailed. I think it is time that we reinvent and look back, and this is an opportunity for us. We are also the fastest growing economy in the world. India's G20 presidency will work to promote universal sense of oneness, echoed our Prime Minister Modi. And all of you know that it is based on Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, of one earth, one family, one future. But here I would like to bring you back to the Sangam literature, being a very, because even in the Sangam literature, which is much older, and I am invoking the poem 192 from the Purananur, which might probably gives us some clue of the depth of richness, maturity and wisdom of the urban culture of the Sangam period and of India at that time. It also says that every city is your city. Everyone is your kin. So you have the same concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Once more, I welcome you to JNU, which stands for excellence with empathy, unlike the IITs. And sir, we are the only university to produce 2 Nobel Prize winners, which no IIT in India has produced. And the Presidency College, Chennai, for physics too. So I think Government of India should pamper us a little more, give us better infrastructure. I also say we stand for equality with equity, as well as inclusion with integrity and innovation. And please know that this school began much before JNU began by the famous Professor Appadurai as ICWA under our first Prime Minister, after whom we are named, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And this school has made several strides after that, and I'm myself a product of this school. So I'm very proud of being a product of this school, and I welcome you to JNU, where we have tradition with modernity and realm with region, change with continuity, and hence I welcome you all once again. I request Professor Vardhan Shringala.
There is a 2 minutes G20 official video.
Okay. Please, then you take over. That would be much better.
No, thank you.
Okay, you have a 2-minute video of the G20. Let's have a look at it. I think you'll have to switch off these lights.
India, home of 1.3 billion people, is a confluence of religions, traditions, and customs. A thriving global center of technology and the world's largest democracy. As one of the oldest civilizations in the world with a rich cultural heritage and diversity, and as the 5th largest economy in the world, India is proud to assume the presidency of G20. As the country blooms into a new era, we look to another poignant symbol for humanity to emerge victorious from its challenges. Lotus, the national flower of India, representing our culture, history, and heritage. A poignant symbol for humanity to emerge victorious from its challenges. And the inspiration for India's G20 logo design. The design, rendered in saffron, white, green, and blue, is drawn from the national flag of India. The 7 petals in the logo signify the 7 seas and the coming together of 7 continents at G20 India 2023. Sitting above the lotus is a representation of the earth, reflecting India's pro-planet approach to life and seeing the world as one family. From this, we derive the theme for G20 India 2023, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. A theme that brings the G20's focus on shared global growth, while being in harmony with nature. G20 India 2023. One earth, one family, one future.
वसुधैव कुटुम्बकम्
I now request Shri Harshvardhan Shringala, the G20 Chief Coordinator for India, Ambassador as well, for his keynote address. Let me tell you, he and me hail from Maharashtra. Partially, sir. So I'm very proud of that.
Vice Chancellor Professor Pandit, Director General of the RIS, Professor Chaturvedi, Professor Emeritus Dr. S.T. Muni, Professor Balaji, Professor Samina Hamid, members of the faculty, and dear students. Let me begin by saying how happy I am to have this opportunity to be here in this renowned institution, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Over the past over 5 decades, the university has emerged as a center of excellence, as one of the leading centers of knowledge in our country. And I think the Vice Chancellor is very correct in pointing out that you have a very celebrated alumni who have contributed in all sections of endeavor, human endeavor. In particular, I think you're very well represented in this government with Finance Minister Srimati Nirmala Sitaram. And I was going to say that you will have no problems in any of your proposals because you're more than ably represented. You have External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, India's G20 Sherpa, Amitabh Kant. I'm also happy to point out that my colleague Amrita Banerjee from the 2016 batch of the IFS is also a JNU alumni. And if I'm not mistaken, from the School of International Studies, right? So you hail from this school, which, as you say, predates the actual setting up of the university itself. So it is definitely an honor to come here and speak on the subject of India's G20 presidency. We are also very appreciative of the fact that JNU has been a part of our G20 presidency process. We have contributed to it in many ways. I recall that the first event we hosted on the 1st of December to commemorate our presidency with the RIS, we were very happy to have the Vice Chancellor as a part of that proceeding, and that's what kicked off our presidency. It's been 9 months since then, and a lot of water has flown under the bridge, of which we'll try and give you some sense of what has actually transpired since then. But the JNU also hosted this recent event on the G20 and India-Africa cooperation right here. And I think that itself is important, considering that in our effort to ensure that representation is there, not just of our G20 partners within our G20 presidency proceedings, but also countries that are not part of the G20, in particular from the global south, I think is an important endeavor from our side. And Africa has the highest levels of representation in our G20, under our G20 presidency, with I think at least 5 countries from the African continent being present. We also are very mindful of the fact that international organizations need more representation from the developing world, which is why we have asked for the African Union to be represented as a permanent member of the G20. And this is work in progress. We have approached all G20 countries, and we hope that this will be one of the outcomes of our G20 presidency, where we can all agree that Africa should be represented in the one of the leading groupings in the world. Of course, the G20 University Connect is an important part of our efforts to broad base the G20's message, but particularly the message of our presidency, and we're very happy that today's event is also part of the University Connect program. A few days ago, you would recall that the Prime Minister, on the occasion of our 77th year of independence, had spoken about the 3Ds. He spoke about demography, democracy, and diversity. And in many senses, he referred to it as a Triveni that collectively possess the power to realize every aspiration of the nation. And the JNU is a manifestation of this trinity. The university, in its 50 years, has provided affordable and quality education to all sections of Indian society, and has also attracted a very large number of international students from the global south as well as from the developed world. So I think this is an important factor. Clearly, when the rest of the world is witnessing aging populations, India is an exception with an average median age of 28 years. 2/3 of our population is below 35 years of age, and that makes you, the students of the university, the true architects of India's future and the beneficiaries of its success story. I think before we go into any details on our presidency, I just want to briefly put into context the circumstances in which we took over the presidency of this very important international grouping. And Vice Chancellor has already pointed out what it represents in global terms, in global economic terms, in global representational terms, and of course what it means for us as a nation. So first and foremost, of course, we have taken over the presidency of the G20 in a rather difficult time in the international arena. The world was barely recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. When we saw the outbreak of the Ukraine conflict, which has its own geopolitical and consequent geo-economic ramifications on the rest of the world. I think these two major black swan events have clearly impacted on the global economy. Lowering growth, increasing inflation has become the hallmark on a global basis. But I think what is of concern also is that much of the collateral has been felt by the developing world. It is the global south that is reeling under the impact of the crises that you see across the world. And I think clearly this is reflected in the fact that the costs of essential imports of food, fuel, fertilizers has gone up exponentially. And that is also reflected in the increasing levels of indebtedness. 70% of developing countries are either indebted or close to indebtedness. And this is a concern that we internalize as we started to take over our presidency of the G20. Now, from our own point of view, of course, I think we emerged out of a devastating pandemic with a certain amount of resilience, a certain amount of confidence in our ability to deal with our own concerns and our own requirements internally, Atmanirbhar Bharat. At the same time, I think at a global level, the world saw us as the fastest growing large economy, also as a country that had demonstrated its effectiveness in implementing the ability to empower people through financial inclusion, digital public infrastructure, reach out to every section of our population, and the very concrete achievements that we have undertaken, whether it is in providing clean drinking water, whether it's providing electricity and power to our people, whether it is in ensuring housing for the poor, and the effect of many of the schemes that have been disproportionately positively felt by women whether it's availing of loans under the Mudra scheme, or it is in terms of opening new bank accounts. I think women have become disproportionate beneficiaries of government incentives. And I think all of this has been, again, very prominently noted, and many countries have felt that if there is one country who can take over the presidency of this important grouping, bring about some level of effective global governance through the G20, it is India. And here again, of course, we are in a fortunate position as a country, we are not only members of, or we are not only frequent invitees to organizations like the G7, but we are also members of the Quad and other organizations. We are members of BRICS, we are members of SCO, and we straddle that ideological space between North and South and East and West. And that's very important when you look at the G20, because the global polarizations today cut across the G20. The G20 really has in its membership a very representational membership, but it also has the fault lines of an ideological divide that you increasingly see politically and economically. And so again, there is an important imperative to bridge this divide, to ensure that our philosophy of working for the global common good, working towards realizing human-centric globalization, in keeping with our ancient philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, is realized in a manner that I think the world has not seen as yet. So I'm just trying to put things in a certain context. What are our objectives with regard to the G20? Very briefly, it is the first time that India has been president of the G20. It is no doubt rotational, but nonetheless it is an opportunity, and we should not leave an opportunity like this without making the best use of it. At the same time, it is the largest international, the most significant international event that India has hosted, I think, in its entire history. We've had the NAM summit, we've had the CHOGM, but those were one-off events. The G20, as I said, cuts across every level of human endeavor. There are about 35 different areas in which the G20 meets throughout the year. We in India have already hosted 190 meetings of the G20 in different sectors across our country, and we're very proud of the fact that this has been a pan-Indian G20. It has not been a remote event in the capital. It has been an event that has been held in every state and union territory of India. And by the time we finish our presidency, we would have covered 60 different cities of our country. And having been and traveled to many of these states and union territories to prepare the ground for the G20 presidency, I can tell you that there are parts of our country that have never hosted an international meeting, that have not had the capacity to do so. But today, these places have really come up to the occasion. The states and union territories have put their might behind this. Municipalities also. We have seen urban transformations, beautification, development of capacity which never existed, and most important, the confidence to hold international meetings and to host them in the future. If you go to Srinagar, which I went to, I think the entire union territory was very much taken up by the fact that we've hosted the biggest event in that place since 1947. And from that perspective, I think the improvements that it brought in terms of urban transformations to that city of Srinagar, the interest that it evoked internationally, the fact that it generated a huge amount of tourism in that union territory and into Srinagar itself, I think was a testimony to the success of this endeavor. So our objective, of course, has been to place our narrative on the international agenda. I mean, as a diplomat, most of my career has been spent in responding to narratives that others have put on the agenda. For a change, we are bringing narratives onto the international agenda, and I'm happy to tell you there are some 59 different initiatives that we have taken in the G20 process. I'm talking about substantive initiatives, and I am reasonably confident that we will see a good number of them reflected in the final outcomes that our presidency will produce. So that is the first objective. Secondly, of course, because we have taken the G20 and broad-based it throughout the country, what we are trying to do is to make sure that our cultural heritage, our cultural diversity is on display for the world to see. Also, it brings to the fore our tourism potential. We have taken people to the Ran of Kutch. We have taken the G20 to my own hometown of Darjeeling, of which I am very proud personally, to Srinagar, and to different parts of the country which I think were not exposed internationally to date. So we have in many senses achieved some of the larger objectives. And of course, this process is still on. In a few weeks, we will have our summit, and I'm sure you will see a summit that will produce the expectations of an ambitious, inclusive, result-oriented and decisive presidency that the Prime Minister predicted when he took over our presidency in Bali in November 2022. From that perspective, I think broad-basing G20, getting the message across to every part of the country through a process of Jan Bhagidari. This itself is an example of Jan Bhagidari under the G20 University Connect program, very ably implemented by the RIS. As many as 100 universities would have held specific programs. And at a non-official level, in other words, outside of the G20 University Connect, I think hundreds more of universities would have conducted their own programs. So this is a way that we have been able to encourage discourse, discussion, debate and dissemination of information on our G20 presidency at a level that is, I would say, already fairly aware at the tertiary levels, at the levels of higher education. At the school level, we have the model G20, which has in some senses supplanted the UN model system. And again, schools all over our country have been enthusiastic in fostering discussion and debate on the G20. We have used festivals, we have used quiz competitions, we have used marathons, every means possible to get that message across to the grassroots levels. And today, with events being held in different parts of our country, in practically every part of our country, every single citizen is a stakeholder in the G20 process. So the effective communication and involvement and democratization of the G20 presidency in our country, I think, is a unique perspective which no other G20 presidency before us has ever endeavored and ever achieved. So I think already we have achieved many of the areas of success that we planned and endeavor that we plan to do. I mentioned the Global South, and it was important to ensure that before we took over our presidency, we consulted countries of the developing world. And in our outreach, which is called Voice of Global South, 125 countries participated at many at the levels of head of state and government. And that gave us a sense of what their views were, their concerns were, and their expectations of our G20 presidency. And we have factored these in formulating our broad priorities for the G20 presidency. We have, of course, taken into account what our partners want, what we ourselves would like to see, but also what the developing world would like to see. And if you see our priorities, whether they are to foster growth, sustainable, balanced, inclusive growth, whether they are to add momentum to the SDG process, which is faltering midway, whether it is a green development pact for a sustainable future, whether it's gender equality and women's empowerment, technological transformations and digital public infrastructure, and strengthening of multilateral institutions for the 21st century. I think these have all been endeavors that in some ways impact on the larger international community, and I'll try and give you very briefly a sense of what we've been trying to do. SDGs are important because it impacts on growth and development across the world. And I think the G20 process has worked under our presidency on a 7-year SDG plan, what is called the 2023 Action Plan, to accelerate progress on the SDGs. And this plan, I think, has been adopted at the foreign ministers level. We have to, of course, take it up to the summit. But it is a very elaborate plan that gives you the means, or gives countries the means to take this SDG process and bring it to its logical conclusion by 2030. Also, we have always been talking about sustainable consumption. It is not enough to talk about climate actions. Climate actions are important. You also need the means to achieve those actions, but you also need to make sure that at the same time you have actions that are at the level of the common person. In other words, the individual also must contribute. It is not just an endeavor between governments. So how do we achieve sustainable consumption and the fact that we are talking about lifestyle changes. So we call the pro-planet people. That means people contribute towards ensuring that there is more sustainable consumption, that the waste economy, the waste to wealth economy, the circular economy, these are concepts that are popularized and across the board implemented. And I mean, of course, the UN Secretary General who was here did point out that we are living at 1.6 times what is sustainable for the earth. So clearly we are leading lives that are unsustainable. We need to do something about it, and people need to do something about it. So we are trying to involve people in that process. And I think the G20 will have endorsed what is called the high principles of sustainable lifestyles for sustainable development. So this will be another imprint of our own ideas and our own vision onto the G20 process, and thereby to the rest of the world. Also, you will recall in 2009 at the Paris climate change conference, there was a decision that the developed world would contribute $100 billion towards climate transition. A lot of the money has not been seen. We have actively taken this up through the G20 process, and that we have a commitment that the developed world will pay $100 billion every year for the next few years. So instead of $100 billion on the whole, we're talking about $100 billion every year. Of course, we do understand that these transitions will cost trillions, not billions, but I think the fact that we are able to get the developed world to look at it and to try and agree on a certain plan of action is also important. In this time of sustainable development, you need to ensure that you also have foods that can be more sustainable. The world is looking for a superfood, and we already have been using the superfood for centuries. I'm talking about millets. So our initiative of millets and other ancient grains, what we call the Maharishi initiative, I think has been accepted also by the G20 in principle, and how we can use a sort of a crop that is climate resistance, needs less water, fertilizer, pesticides, but at the same time is highly nutritious is something that is important. It's our own contribution to the G20 process. Of course, bridging the gender digital divide, increasing women's leadership roles, and enhancing women's food security have been important aspects of the Women 20 and the Women Empower groups of the G20, and I think there is consensus on how this will proceed, and also, of course, increasing the participation of women in the economy, and how to increase that participation by 25% is something that is also an issue here. We've talked about strengthening multilateral development banks. The IMF and the World Bank have done reasonably well in the first 50 years of their existence, but in the 21st century, their ability to meet the requirements and needs of the rest of the world is found wanting. How can we enhance their mandate? How can we empower them to garner more resources? How can they contribute towards alleviating the issue of indebtedness of states? How can they contribute towards climate financing? These are areas that we are working on, and I think we will have some results here as well. And then, of course, technologies of the future. How do you deal with new and emerging technologies? Do we not need some level of global governance that would govern, say, the use of cryptocurrencies or the use of artificial intelligence with some responsibility? These are areas also that are being discussed, and I think we will look at some outcomes. We have also talked about in the financing cities of tomorrow. How can we arrange financing to efficiently allocate resources to support socially inclusive, environmentally responsible, and economically sustainable cities of the future? I'm just giving a few examples. I mean, there are, as I said, 59 initiatives, but just to give you a few. So essentially, in the post-COVID new world order, I think for a change, instead of responding, we are taking the lead, we are taking the initiative. Coming from a background of diplomacy, I can say that the rest of the world also expects us to do that. Perhaps it is not, I would say, incorrect to say that India's time in many senses has come. This is the time in which we are demographically in a very unique position. In developmental terms, we are growing. Democracy, the Vice Chancellor has correctly pointed about our democratic roots, about how we are the mother of democracy, how democracy predates many of the Western concepts of democracy, whether it's the Magna Carta or any other developments there. I think we should be proud of our democratic traditions and proud of the contemporary traditions that we have established irrevocably in democracy today. And I think here given all of these factors, whether it's demography, whether it is democracy, is diversity or development, I think we are very well placed to achieve through the G20 process of greater global healing, health and harmony, as we call it. It's a presidency of healing, health and harmony. And as we go along to the summit in a couple of weeks, I think we are optimistic that we will be able to achieve these objectives. And I'm just leaving you with a quick quote of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam when he says the best way to predict the future is to create it. And that future lies with all of you. Thank you very much.
I thank Ambassador Harshvardhan Shringala for his keynote address, and I hope this will start a long, I think 2 weeks of lectures till the September 8th. And I thank both the RIS and the G20 for in their University Connect program, giving JNU the opportunity. Ambassador Shringla, let me tell you, JNU stands for 7 Ds, and 3 of them are included in what you mentioned. We add to it dissent, development, as well as difference, and democracy is there, and discussion as well. So JNU has the Ds and plus 4 after that. So I always tell people who doubt India's democracy today that if there is democracy in JNU, there is democracy in India. Thank you, and I now request Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, who is the Director of RIS, for his special remarks. And sir, once again, I thank you for giving JNU this opportunity, and I hope you keep supporting us beyond the G20 as well.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Professor Pandit. Thanks for this opportunity. It's a great pleasure for us to partner with JNU. Always very enriching. And you very rightly said that JNU would do it differently. So this idea of pathways and paradigms for India's G20 is something which is so innovative. No other university in the country has thought of that. We have already partnered with 78 universities so far. As Ambassador Shringla very rightly mentioned, this is something which is to reach out to universities, which is to reach out to youth and tell them about the G20. And tomorrow I would be in Amarkantak, where we have Tribals University, and I would be speaking there on our G20 partnership. So I think JNU has done it differently. You have planned not 1 but 18 lectures, and it would be beginning with none other than Professor S.D. Muni. So I'm absolutely delighted to partner with you, and we would certainly go beyond the idea of G20 alone. And that's, I think, the very concept with which Prime Minister suggested it to Ambassador Harsh Shringla to begin a series of this nature, which is not part of any G20 commitment in any country. And this is something that he was trying to mention when he mentioned that we have reached out to different cities. If you see Chinese G20 presidency, there were around 15 cities in which China did events of this nature. And we found Indonesia, which was a part of Troika this time, only 25 cities. And as Ambassador Shringla mentioned, we have crossed 57 destinations already. So this is something which is part of our effort to create a larger, unique sort of narrative across the country, engage the country, and go beyond some of the elite universities to all. And the task that was given to RIS was largely possible because we had a very rich advisory committee, and I'm thankful to Gulshan and Professor Kadampalli, who were part of the advisory committee for University Connect. We reached out to others. Shankari joined us in the first meeting. So it was a good, rich contribution from all professors from different universities who really guided us, and I think that has enriched. I would just make 4 quick points in terms of what Ambassador Harsh Shringla is already very comprehensively captured in terms of what pathways India has thought of in the G20 and how we are going to go forward. The first and foremost, as an economist, what I see happening here in the G20 is a new narrative on development, and that I think we need to realize from various perspectives that it is coming up. the idea of life that Prime Minister gave at COP26 is something which is extremely important. And what India has done should have been done back, Madam, in 2015, when three major global agreements we had arrived at. One, of course, was Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which we adopted in New York in 2015. And immediately after that was the Paris Agreement. Both of them have got huge attention. The third agreement, which was the first in series in 2015, which hasn't got much attention, is the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, AAA. And this was largely to bring in resources to the global south. How global governance of taxation should happen and in what way we go forward in terms of mobilizing resources. India's G20 presidency has brought forward this new development paradigm through the idea of lifestyle for environment, but that, as Ambassador Shingla rightly mentioned, has now been seen as a lifestyle for sustainable development. And the high-level principles that have emanated out of that, he alluded to the foreign ministers meeting, which has captured the high-level principles for sustainable development goals. So, n number of initiatives, 59 that he mentioned, are part of this rubric, which is now trying to create an alternative development model that we need to see. India is also part of Troika, so we have Indonesia, India, and Brazil. And when the presidency goes to Brazil, India would be part of Troika with South Africa. The issue here is a university like JNU, the very rich faculty here and students, what kind of research we need to take this forward. I am sure all of you are aware, but let me just mention here that the crisis when it happened in 97, 98 in Southeast Asia, which led to this entity, the concept was confined to finance ministries alone. And that continued till Lehman Brothers in 2007 and 8. And it was at that point when the presidency reached South Korea and Canada. In 2010, there were two presidencies in 1 year, South Korea and Canada. And Madam, there the idea came up that by solving financial challenges, we cannot really resolve them unless we bring in the dimension of development. So South Korea added the development component in the financial architecture of G20. This is the second time that development has been brought back as the central pivot of G20's history that we see. In 2010, when South Korea proposed development, their idea was to bring in Sherpa track. So Sherpa track came in. Otherwise, it was just finance minister and central bank governors. So in 2010 onwards, Sherpa track came in, and within Sherpa track, what was informally meeting at the level of labor unions, L20, we got introduced T20. And fortunately, I was part of the 2011 Paris G20 when we discussed of creating a platform for think tanks, research institutions, which was called as T20. And T20 then became part of 2012 onwards from Mexican presidency. We have met since then on the sidelines of all the G20 meetings. T20 has contributed immensely, and during this T20 presidency, we have come up with one suggestion to the government to create a global research platform where social science research, natural science research, they converge. And we work closely with what is called as Science 20 S20. So the global solutions require multidisciplinary approach now, as is emerging very clearly. So from that perspective, how a research community may become part of it. And there, ma'am, the larger challenges in terms of the new presidencies which are coming in right from Indonesia onwards are not members of OECD. So we don't have a structured secretariat to support, as was in the case of previous presidencies where OECD provided huge research support. So Indian T20 suggested to the government to bring it up to G20 that a global research network of institutions, universities, think tanks should come together and provide inputs to future presidencies. Because if we are providing narratives from the political leadership, academic community has to see where the evidences are, what kind of evidences we have, and we take that forward. So that's the first point that I want to make, and that's where I see a huge role for universities to come in, provide inputs, and get engaged in terms of the kind of discussions which are on in terms of our narratives and our ideas there. The second point that I want to mention is in terms of when we think of our G20 presidency, how do we get things right, which are important? Because if you see, and before coming here, I was just seeing statistics. There is a clear decline in the G7. We don't have to bother much in terms of how this is going to happen. And I was seeing G7, ma'am, in 1961. The share of G7, as you can imagine, was 68.5% in global GDP in constant prices, and if you see it in current, it was close to 70.5%. Now it stands somewhere close to 36% in current prices, and only 41 in terms of constant prices. If you see labor force in 1981, they had around 13.9 million people working. That has now come down to 9 million people. It is also declining in terms of the balance of payment, in terms of gross capital formation, in terms of domestic savings and forex reserves, which have gone down like anything. They now stand only at 21% of the total global reserves. So the heft with which G7 could provide leadership, it has shifted out. Then we did separate analysis to see how much China owns in this and what is the share of the rest of the global south. So the second point that I want to make is the leadership phase of the G7 is over. G20 is now having leadership from the global south. The issue here is what narrative on development global south is bringing on table. To what extent it is backed by our research, and to what extent it is backed by the kind of distinction traditionally we have been teaching in our economics departments and other centers in terms of development and growth, which is a very traditional idea, but how do we see convergence? Because India cannot wait for either of them. We have to have both together. We have to make the process, as Ambassador Shingla said, inclusive, participative, but at the same time we have to grow fast. So all things have to happen together, and that has to come over the distinctions and polarizations we have seen in East-West terms and also in North and South. The idea that Prime Minister had on 12th and 13th of January this year by hosting Voice of Global South is largely manifested in terms of India's invitation to African Union, which would presumably become a 21 member of the larger global community. And if that happens in a way, we would see what the recent IMF report shows, 80% of the growth for 23-24 would come from emerging markets. So you are having very clear evidences in terms of how we are going to go forward. The third point that I want to mention here is in terms of some initiatives that are important for our sort of narrative, which I think is important, particularly in terms of how the multilateral financial institutions, be that in form of the regional development banks, global financial institutions, how do we bring in finance that is sustainable, that is providing impetus to our idea of commitment. The second facet of that is in terms of cryptocurrency and management of that, in terms of how the participation is happening. And third is very much in terms of the resilient infrastructure that we are talking of. The declaration in terms of Gandhinagar implementation roadmap for G20 infrastructure plan is something which is important. How the global green hydrogen ecosystem is coming up is also important in terms of how we see the energy priority that is coming in. And from that perspective, if I see some efforts that India has made are largely in terms of our own success stories which have come in. The fact that in last 2 years, India has invested $26.5 billion in infrastructure development shows the way idea of Gati Shakti, the multimodal transport connectivity. extending that to neighborhood, and trying to bring them on board. So Bangladesh is our special invitee country in this. It's a global south sitting on the table along with us, trying to be part of the major development initiatives of India, trying to see how South Asia's own energy grid that we are talking of connects Southeast Asia and Central Asia together. So that kind of large landscape that we are talking of on land is also part of the connectivity that we are seeing through Sagarmala, and trying to see in the oceans the governance component that is there. This also brings in to the new development paradigm that I talked about, is in terms of its measurement. There is a proposal from T20 to see how we go beyond measurement of this new development paradigm in terms of going beyond the gross domestic product as the sole indicator of development. So in what way we compute well-being index, where we factor in, as Dasgupta Committee for UK Treasury suggested, to bring in biodiversity in our factor of composition for growth. So with erosion of biodiversity, with erosion of nature, we cannot just count on GDP as sole parameter. So this is one big dimension we have brought in. The third facet of that, madam, is to bring forward the idea of ethics, which Prime Minister in his inaugural address for G20 on 1st of December emphasized. This whole growth process cannot overlook what happened with the US capitalism with Lehman Brothers. The disconnect between ethics and finance is something which is important for us to bear in mind. Indian G20 presidency, bringing in ethics in our development narrative, ethics bringing in technology and in finance are extremely important. Just towards the closing of the T20 statement of the Task Force 3, we have discussed advances in synthetic biology, where China has already produced synthetic babies. They are now in the 4th year of their life. These babies are their genetics composition is amended in such a way that they would never get cough and cold, they would never get tuberculosis. And these babies are now 4 years old. The world is watching with awe. We are puzzled in terms of how ethics and technology connect can be forcefully established, and that's where the role of the global platforms like G20 are important, and that's where the narrative building is. Presidency would end on 30th November, but some of these issues would remain there on table. We would be part of Troika, and this global research network that I just mentioned would remain active in terms of contributing not only to Brazilian presidency as they go forward, but also with South Africa. We are in close partnership with South Africa. JNU has celebrated partnership with Africa for very long, as was already mentioned. And I think it's time for us to see how experts like Professor Muni can establish this connect for South Asia, but also with Africa and Central Asia, where we need to bring some of these issues as part of the larger development narrative. Thank you, madam.
The entire framework in which the T20 and under the University 20 narrative. Sir, I think I'm also happy that the G20 and the Prime Minister has brought in women-led development. And I think that is something that JNU rejoices, because I think India is a feminist civilization. And it's very important that, and I also thank you for bringing in the new narrative on development. I think it's more, we look at development from a concept of balance, the Panchabhutas, which brings in sustainability and diversity as well. And I think these are areas in which India can contribute hugely to the new. And the Sagar Mala, and also and on the question of science and technology, let me tell you that Professor Anand Ranganathan is a professor of JNU in the School of Molecular Medicine. So synthetic babies can also be done with a lot of, but you're right, there are a lot of bioethics in it, and I think this is a major issue for all of us. And I'm happy that, sir, I'm happy we look for JNU also this as a, what to say, just a threshold from where we would move further, especially in the knowledge society and becoming the Vishwa Guru. I think these are issues that we want to take forward with the government of India. I thank you once again for coming, And should Samina Hamid ask Professor Muni to have us, or you would like to leave, sir? Or okay. Yeah, he has a flight, sir, so he would leave. So we would thank Professor Sachin Chaturvedi of the RIS for the huge support that they gave to JNU. And as I said, this is continuous, sir, and we hope that it will be there with from MEA as well, Ambassador Shringla, with our support from the Government of India, and we hope that this will go on. And I thank Professor Chaturvedi for coming. He has a flight to catch to go to another university, and so I thank you for coming to JNU. Okay, with him, and even Ambassador Shringla would like to leave. Would you want to propose a vote of thanks or something like that? Balaji.
Shringla ji, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Professor D.S. Muni, Dean SAS, my dear colleagues, other esteemed guests, and my dear fellow students. On behalf of G20 University Connect Lectures, I and Dr. Samina stand before you with a heart filled with gratitude and appreciation for this wonderful gathering that had taken place today. Our inauguration event has been a resounding success, and it wouldn't have been possible without the collective efforts and support of numerous individuals. First and foremost, I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to our esteemed Vice Chancellor for taking out time from her extremely busy schedule to chair today's event. A special thanks from the organizers to you, ma'am, for your presence. Your constant support and encouragement have enriched our minds and inspired us to think beyond the boundaries. A heartfelt thanks goes out to our special invited guest, Ambassador, the Chief Coordinator for India's G20 Presidency, Sri Harshvardhan V. Shringlaji. We are highly indebted to you for inaugurating this G20 University Connect Lectures. Sir, there is no other person who is best suitable to inaugurate this program. Thank you, sir. We are also thankful to Professor Sachin Chaturvedi ji, who is currently Director General at the Research and Information Systems for Developing Countries, RIS. We are thankful to you for being a partner and sponsoring, who believed in our vision and lent your unwavering support to make this event a reality. Your commitment to our cause is truly commendable, and we are truly grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with you. Thank you, sir. Sir, I will thank you later. We are also thankful to SwayamPrabha TV channel, an initiative by Ministry of Education to disseminate knowledge beyond the four walls of a classroom, to be one of the sponsors of this program. It would be incomplete if I failed to thank major role played by Professor Kumaraswamy and Dr. Mudasir for the many brainstorming sessions and initial discussions which shaped the G20 University Connect series. Thanks to both of you. Our dedicated volunteers deserve a special mention for their tireless efforts behind the scenes. Your hard work, enthusiasm, and willingness to go the extra mile have been the driving force behind the seamless execution of this event. Sorry, I am taking a little bit more time. Okay, sorry. To our attendees, we express our sincere appreciation for choosing to spend your valuable time with us. Your presence and active... Okay, sure. Okay. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll thank all the rest later.
Yeah.
Request Professor Muni, one of our esteemed professors, former ambassador, and my teacher as well. Most of you knew we young girls used to go to Sir's class because he was one of the most handsome young assistant professors and would keep us enchanted in every way. Sir, Professor Muni, and he was brilliant as well. Thank you.
No, it's fine. I think you. I hope you will be able to hear me. I in any case have a very loud voice. Thank you very much to begin with. I think I particularly thankful to the organizers of this conference and Professor Pandit, Vice Chancellor. It is after 4 years that I get this chance to interact directly with the students and colleagues. It's absolutely wonderful. In addition to this, I am happy to note the MEA symbol there, which means MBA is sponsoring this seminar. And this is where I wanted to tell Ambassador Shringla and also Sachin that it is good that MEA is joining hands with JNU. Only few years back, MEA had withdrawn even committed funds to JNU for its activities. It's unfortunate that MEA has chosen to fund lavishly private corporate organizations like ORF and Gateway House, who don't need any money, don't need any support. The universities, which are centrally funded, deeply require this, and I wish they were both present, but I would request the Vice Chancellor and the organizers to send this message that this is how Muni was talking. I am not complaining, I am appealing to them that it is the time that they start devoting their attention to the universities in order to see the pool of knowledge to grow. Now I am also happy that this very event of G20 is being geared and steered by 3 people, and they are all the 3 products of JNU. Their names have already been announced: Jaishankar, Nirmala Sitharaman, and Amitabh Kant. I may not agree with many things which they say and do, and I am quite critical of whatever they say, but I am proud of them. I am proud of them because they were part of my classrooms and they were part of my projects, all the 3 of them. Therefore, I am so happy that this university is now having an event where the steering wheel is in the hands of those who were products of JNU. Now you have had 2 brilliant insiders' views on G20, and they have told you the internal dynamics. I am an outsider. I don't know what cooks inside. And I have been mandated to speak only on the theme, which is the beginning of the beginning. Therefore, I will confine myself to that theme and present and share my views with you. The theme is Vasudeva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. Unfortunately, the word Vasudeva Kutumbakam has been taken out of the official documents on the objections of the Chinese only last month, because they said this is a Sanskrit word and Sanskrit is not the language included in the UN Charter. So you can't use it. And India now is forced that in many cases you will see now Vasudeva Kutumbakam gone, one family, one earth, one future remains. But it is the same translation of that. Now Vasudeva Kutumbakam has been the philosophy and the spirit of projecting India to the world for a long time. All the prime ministers, from Nehru to Narendra Modi, have been using this expression. Of course, during Narendra Modi's regime, this expression has become far more frequent and probably connected with many of the moves and actions of it. But it is something which is actually used by all the prime ministers, and it is a part of us. So my first, what I want to share with you is why it is that we accepted this logo for this wonderful exercise which we are doing. I have 3 reasons for that. One is that it is a part of Indian ethos. the Vasudev Kutumbakam, is a part of Indian ethos. Secondly, we are dealing with a globalized world. And thirdly, it is the need of the hour. Some of the points have been preceded by the two eloquent speakers who said about it. Let me go through these points one by one. Part of Indian ethos, they say it has Vedic roots going back into centuries old. Both in Maha-Upanishada and Hitopadesh, there are shlokas which are mentioned which underline the Vasudev Kutumbakam theme. And the whole idea is that the source of life is one divine source. From this life springs, and every other living being is a part of that divine source. Therefore, they are interconnected, they are mutually connected. And being connected, they are a part of the family. And therefore, it does not confine itself only to the human beings. It undertakes human beings, plants and animals. So, the entire universe in a way within the planet Earth is considered a family, and so we are a family. It has also been reinforced by what Professor Pandit mentioned earlier of the spread of Indian civilization, which covered from Peru to the Central Asia or up to Iran, you can say, if you don't go to Africa. I'm sorry. Really sorry for this. And therefore, it reinforces the concept of we all being a family. So that is how it is being propagated, and it is being projected. But there are two caveats which are not being mentioned. The one caveat is, and I have those slokas, I don't want to burden you with Sanskrit language, but there are two words which appear in both the slokas. One is Lagu Chetasam, and the second one is Udar Charitanam. Now, what these slokas say is that Lagu Chetasam, the people with a narrow-minded concept don't look at the world as a family. Only people who are noble and magnanimous look at the world as a family. Therefore, there is a class inherent in it to begin with. In the concept itself, it says that only a select group of people who have a magnificent mind really project it as one family. The others see in terms of my sister, my brother, he is a stranger, he is an outsider. They look at the world divided, not united. Now, if this is so, I think we have the underlying message, which may not be clear to many of those who are sitting in the G20 conferences, is that we in India have a magnanimous mind, which many of you may not have, and they do not have, because that comes out in the dynamics. I'll come in a short while ago. Therefore, this one caveat, we must keep it in mind, that it has a certain kind of this is JNU, I can speak that expression, class character, put it this way, in which there is a certain class of people who accept it, others don't. The second caveat is out of Dalit literature, madam. And one mention is that actually the word comes from the Tamil literature, which you mentioned in one of the expressions, and that goes before the Vedic conception of it. Therefore, this is not original to the Vedic literature. This is what Dalit literature says. The second thing which Dalit literature says is that not only Tamil, it is not Vedic at all. Because in Vedas, there are 4 Vedas and 11 Upanishads. And this word does not appear in either of them. In fact, this appears in, as I mentioned to you, Maha-Updesha and Hitopdesha, which have been written years after the Vedic literature was there. It has been written even after Shankaracharya's. Therefore, it has an origin not in the Vedic, and therefore to propagate this expression as a Vedic heritage is not correct. That's what the Dalit literature emphasizes. And I think we must keep these two caveats which are there. Now I leave this controversy here, because somehow the expression has been come to be accepted as the one which is with Indian heritage and Indian culture, and therefore we continue to use it. And that is why, in order to represent the Indian ethos for G20, this has been accepted. The second reason why, to my mind, this expression has been used is the world has been globalized, you like it or not. Whether you take it as a family or not, its distances have shrunk through road, rail, and air travels. And they are going much faster and much bigger, and they probably therefore go. There are businesses which are spread across the sovereign boundaries and connected with each other in one way or the other. The world is connected through internet. 5.19 billion people by July 23 have access to internet, which constitutes nearly 70% of the world's population, is connected with each other if they wish to be. Then social media, which accounts for 4.8 billion people and almost 60% of the world population. And in social media, without knowing people, you chat with each other. Without knowing people, you marry each other. There are instances of this is happening. Without knowing each other, you recover your families. Mothers and sons recovering after years thanks to social media. Therefore, it has brought us very, very close. Then mobile phones, 5.56 billion people own mobile phones, which is 84% of the world population. Therefore, this is a network which has connected the world. Whether you are family or not, you have prospects of becoming a family, literally, even if you don't want to it. And India is one of the most well-connected countries. 800 million people in India have access to internet. And the technology minister was telling somewhere the other day that in coming years we are going to raise it to 1.2 billion people, which is almost the entire population of India. Therefore, the world is connected whether you like it or not. So you have to deal with as a unit, as a collectivity which is closer to each other. Then there are global commons which have come up, which we all talk in our research and papers. The global commons are Earth's atmosphere, which is connected to climate change, Antarctica, ocean floors, and outer space. And all of them are considered to be full of resources which have got to be harnessed. And you cannot harness them individually or in groups. They have to be harnessed collectively. So they bring the burden on us to look at the world as one unit because of the global connectivity. Then we have integrated world economy. These are the facts which all of you know very well. I am just flagging them. And 1997 to 2008, the two crises brought this point very sharply to everybody's consciousness that you cannot resolve your economic problems by confining to yourself. Individually, you find no solutions. Regionally, you find no solutions. Southeast Asia was in a deep crisis during 1997, and they realized that they cannot solve it. And the world realized later on, by 2007, 2008, the G7 realized when the 2008 crisis came that we cannot really solve it separately. Therefore, we have to collectively join hands with each other. Security is indivisible. We talk in our classes, we have many projects which are saying, from nuclear threats to terrorism, from terrorism to international crimes. You see everywhere this connectivity which is there. And then there are common challenges like climate change, which we are talking about, pandemonium, which has been talked sufficiently, and natural disasters, tsunami or quakes which are coming up, are going beyond your sovereign boundaries in one way or the other. And therefore, collective approach as a family, if you can will probably do better or would only enable you to address some of the issues than otherwise. Now, this is the second point which is important to say. The third point is need of the hour. And need of the hour, you have to go back to the origin of G20, which is started with the Asian economic crisis and actually then got clubbed up with the global economic crisis, and then as Sachin has said very clearly that the development issue came up in. And with development issue came this concept of Sherpa. On the one hand, there was a financial forum which was being talked about, then became a Sherpa forum. Now Sherpa forum, because development is a bigger issue, but moment the development came up, moment the Sherpa channel came up, the politics intruded into the whole issue. And there is absolutely no issue today on the table of G20 which you can resolve without referring to the political aspects. Now this is what we have to keep it in mind when we look at the need of the hour. And the India, we are the 18th country which is now holding it. It's a routine. We had to have it now because out of the 20, 17 had already chaired this session in one way. I have a feeling we could have taken up the chairmanship way back in, we could be 17th, we could be 16th, before Italy. In terms of alphabetical order, we could have taken it. We could have taken before Indonesia, and before Italy, we were sounded if we want to take it. We did not take it. The reasons for not taking, some of the reasons have been explained. I have my own reasons, and it may be politically not wise to discuss them here, but it certainly has a domestic political dimension. Look deep into it, that why we chose 23 as the preferred year for holding the G20. The whole exercise of taking it to all the cities, of taking it to remote cities, of the massive, what you call projection of this event, has certain logic behind it. And that's something left better undiscussed. Now, this is how that's why I think I said why 2023 was preferred. Now, if we had taken this point earlier, maybe we would have been free from some of the challenges which we are facing today. Why I say need of the hour? Because the world today is different than what the world was in 2016 or 2017 or 2018 or even 2019. And how was it different? Firstly, we have the great power relations which have intensified rivalry and conflict today at two levels. One level was mentioned by Ambassador Shringla, that is the Ukraine war. The second level is US-China tension and conflict. Now there are these major blocks. Ukraine war is one and Sino-US rivalry is another one. And both, to my mind, and please correct me because the young minds are much better than the older minds, that both of them are stalemated. In the Ukraine war, Russia may have a little edge right now, but you know this is a graph which keeps on changing. So we don't know what the outcome would be. Therefore, in both the cases, they are stalemated and they are uncertain in terms of their future outcome. The Sino-US conflict is stalemated, and I was little puzzled last 2-3 months that the Americans are sending one after another representatives to China to ensure that there is no conflict. The Chinese have not sent any. So what is being cooked? I don't know if there is an attempt of repeating the 70s, early 70s. I hope not that that happens, but I fear that Americans or any country can make any adjustment if it suits its national interests. And therefore, in order to isolate Russia, because the main problem is there between the US stroke Europe versus Russia. They want to weaken Russia. And if Russia is having an edge in the Ukraine war, and if they cannot defeat or exhaust Russia out of that, there may be other policies, and this could be one of the policies. But even if this is a policy, we have these two major conflicts before us, which did not exist in this intensity, as I said, 3-4 years earlier. Now, there are many regional hotspots also. If you want to add in your analysis, I think you should add also Sino-Indian conflict, which has created some aspects for us, and I'll come to it in a short while. Now, what has these two great power conflicts or polarizations have done? Number one, of course, they have polarized the whole world, as it has been mentioned. And it is becoming very difficult in one way or the other to have consensus, which we are really struggling for. Now, consensus process, therefore, in any international organization meetings, not only G20, it's not only specific to us, anywhere it is becoming a problem, whether it is United Nations or any other regional or international organization where these issues crop up. Supply chains have been badly affected. India's strategic autonomy has been under duress because of these conflicts. I tell you one example. I don't know, maybe Gulshan will bear me out, that in the beginning when Ukraine war started, our position was of equal security to all in Europe. That equal security emphasis, which means that Russia's security concerns should also be taken into account, and Europe's security concerns should also be taken into account, has now been reduced and focused on territorial integrity of Ukraine when we are talking about. We have not condemned Russia for our own reasons, but in terms of the war, we have not endorsed violation of territorial integrity. I think both these, one shows that we have shifted the ground very subtly from the earlier position to the present position. And secondly, if tomorrow there is an outcome, and I may be wrong, I don't see any outcome without territorial adjustment. Because, you know, the 4 areas which the Russians have taken, they are not going to give it up. And the US is not going to leave them easily. Therefore, there will be a compromise if and when the solution comes about. And if the compromise comes, it will be based upon territorial adjustment. What would be India's position then? Because we are asking for the territorial integrity of Ukraine, which is not going to go back to normal, what it was. Therefore, we will have one or the other kind of trouble. Secondly, on China-US conflict, I mean, there is a certain feeling that the border conflict with China seemed to have overpowered all our foreign policy strategy. Everywhere, on every issue, the border becomes absolutely normal. This is not true with many others. Japanese have a border problem with China. I mean, we also have various other relations going on over here, but in terms of foreign policy, which has driven us strategically in a very proximate situation to the US, and it is unique by itself. It had not happened earlier. Therefore, this is a change which has come about in India's what you call the strategic autonomy, which we have been so proud of earlier. Now, therefore, this is making problems for us also, besides creating problem. Now, you know, the answer to is this. This has also caused serious problems for what you call the new situation which has happened is that supply chains have been affected, particularly in the food and energy sector, due to these two conflicts, and the US sanctions have adversely affected trade relations of many countries. In Europe, they have affected some of the European countries, particularly France and Germany, which earlier wanted to have a different track, are now not having a different track. Pandemonium has devastated the economies of the world. And this was referred by Ambassador Shringla in many clear ways. Pandemonium has made people lose their jobs. 200 million people have come under poverty line because of pandemonium. 100 million people have lost their jobs, and inequalities are very pronounced in the world. Now, in India itself, I think top 5% account for 70% of the wealth. Now, on the one hand, we are all happy in terms of GDP figures, but this aspect of Indian economy and global economy are really problems. Now, these divisions and difficulties, therefore, are very difficult to solve in any group or individual manner, and again calls for family approach, for a collective approach, for a consensus approach. India has aspirations, and this has been emphasized in the two insiders' view very clearly, and I agree with that totally. I am not in disagreement with of India representing global south. What is this global south? Will somebody enlighten me how different it is from non-alignment? How different it is from G77? How different it is from the developing countries? How different it is from the so-called third world which we are talking about? How different it is? The tone and temper, the rhetorics is different. In terms of the content of the countries which we want to take along with us, their economies have differed. It has changed because they are now the emerging economies. But the South is the same. It is the South which is taking over. But it is good that we are really trying to give a voice, and it is back to the what you call basic instincts of India's foreign policy. These were the basic instincts there. If you see in the world, there is still a very clear division. I am told in terms of technology and finances, the developed countries still rule the roast. Amitabh Kant the other day told me there are $350 trillion waiting for investment in the developed world to be invested in the developing countries. There are no other ways to develop anywhere else. While the developing world, their SDG has achieved only 12% goals so far. The Sustainable Development Goals which the United decided about it. Climate conflict, debt problems. 75 countries are under serious debt today. All need finances. Technological transition. We are talking of AI. There are many countries which have not graduated even to the first or second level of the technological development. All this would need finances, and where these finances would come? From $350 trillion. They come in one way or the other in terms of debt problems that comes through state or multilateral banks which are there. But if this divide is there, we see this divide is like a divide in the family, where a weaker member of the family is supported by the family, and a stronger and a richer member of the family is taxed by the family to support that. Therefore, we have taken this approach of voicing the concerns of the South, and rightly so, and therefore it is necessary for us in the developing world, which now accounts for 2/3 of the global growth, as has already been talked about, that you have to mobilize these private funding sources for the development of the developing countries. It is very easily said, it is extremely difficult done. And that's the problem which the G20, India is facing in the G20. I don't know if some of you have seen or must have known about N.K. Singh and others' report. One report has come, how multinational banks should be there, what incentives should be given, because most of the money is going to be invested in the developing world. They need infrastructure, they need technological upgradation, they need money to fight climate changes in so many other ways. But for that, this is what we have to undertake in the G20, and the gulf this is created can be bridged not by confrontation. I am not the one who is talking about that. It can only be bridged by consensus, which is extremely difficult. Confrontation is totally out, you cannot do that. Now in this kind of a world, I think it is extremely difficult to take money out of the rich people and to get it invested into the poorer developing countries. But this is a major challenge. But we have to deal with it as a family. Now, therefore, the outcome of the Vasudev Kutumbakam strategy is to treat the world as one family and try and seek solutions within that family are quite relevant. Sherpas have done their best job. Whatever we gather, they all say 90% consensus is already reached. But my God, the other 10% are the most critical cases. There is no consensus, madam, today on the Ukraine war. There is no, which is vitiating all other consensuses, in fact. But there is no consensus today on the climate change. I have some points where the differences are there, but I think we are running out of time. No consensus on the climate change, no consensus on energy transition, no consensus on technological transformation, and no consensus on institutional reforms. Broadly, there is a consensus. When it comes to nitty-gritty of timeline, of targeting, of fixing targets, how to do that, there are serious problems which are there. Now, that being so, and that is on the lighter tone, the last point which I wish to make is, that being so, the concept of family is wonderful, but to treat with the family is horrendous. In fact, the very fact of family is withering away. There are what you call live-ins. The institution of marriage is being eroded very, very seriously. People don't want children today, and the Chinese have produced artificial children also now. So you don't need parents. We are talking about same-sex marriages. Don't take that I am against all of them. I am just saying these are the aspects of the family today. The very fiber of the family, which is on two pillars of marriage and procreation, are breaking down. And the family is not only a nucleus family, it is an individual family. The technology has empowered individuals so much that they don't need any help from anyone. And if that be the status of the family, we better not talk in terms of family. Thank you very much.
I thank Professor Muni. He was as brilliant as he ever is, and very good ideas. And I think I would request Bala, are we going to have any question and answer session?
Yeah.
Okay.
If it is possible, we can. You have
Have a
provoked.
few
You
questions.
said there would be no QA.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
I asked her.
You know, there is no way that you
No,
don't.
I am open. You can tear me out. No problem.
So, maybe if I'm allowed, I'll just thank you. Professor Muni, you've identified so many challenges. What is the way forward? How can we build that consensus?
Satisfying answer to this. What I see the future of G20, despite all the claims which we are making, and I say we are making them rightly. Look, I am not against the serious efforts which have gone into doing it. That we will turn this into yet another regional organization, like United Nations. United Nations was formed for peace and stability in the world. Tell me please one serious conflict which has been resolved by United Nations. One serious conflict. And I would accept that. We have had all kind of, therefore G20 is started as an economic forum. Now it has increasingly become a politicized economic forum, if I want to put it this way. And unless you resolve your political problems, no economic forum can succeed. Therefore, I have no easy answer to this. The only answer is that you will continue with all your efforts. Maybe incremental changes will take place. Certainly, no doubt about that. But if you bring about that, you know, we are very happy. We are having, yes, we have under this global south, we have brought in African Union also. We have tried to do them. We are trying to our best. But it is so hard. Even in G20, there were 7 countries which opposed the African Unions coming in. So they have problems inside. If you get into, you know, it's like a mud, get into the muddy water, then you realize that this is what it is. From outside, it looks like a beautiful pond.
We will thank Professor Muni for his brilliant lecture. So you can imagine how we students of SIS enjoyed his lectures and why we flocked to it. And now I would request Balaji to complete his vote of thanks that he began.
Thankful to Emeritus Professor S.D. Muni for accepting our invitation and taking the God as the experienced opener like Sachin Tendulkar and sharing his wisdom. Thank you, sir. Of course, I will continue with our dedicated volunteers deserve a special mention for their tireless efforts behind the scenes. Your hard work, enthusiasm and willingness to go to the extra mile have been driving force behind the seamless execution of this event. To our attendees, we express our sincere appreciation for choosing to spend your valuable time with us. Your presence and active participation have added innumerable value to our event, fostering an environment of learning, networking, and camaraderie. A big round of applause goes to the JNU support staff for their meticulous planning and meticulous execution. Your dedication and attention to detail have resulted in an event that will be remembered for its flawless arrangement and enjoyable experience. We would also like to extend our thanks to the venue and technical support teams who ensured that everything ran smoothly from the start to finish. Your professionalism and expertise have contributed immensely to the success of this event. Last but certainly not least, we want to acknowledge all those who have been part of our extended community, mainly faculty members, friends, colleagues, who stood by us with unwavering encouragement and understanding during the entire journey. In closing, let us remember that an event success is not merely measured in terms of numbers, but in the lasting impact it leaves on all those involved. With your presence and support, we have undoubtedly achieved such a goal. Thank you all.